Hello everyone, welcome to Conflict News 24 News. The IDF announced over the weekend that it had completed 5 waves of strikes in Gaza City as part of Operation Gideon's Chariots B, in which more than 500 terror targets were attacked. And in parallel, preparations continue for a ground incursion while attempting to evacuate the civilian population to the south of the Gaza Strip due to the congestion in El Mawasi area. And in the midst of this kinetic activity, the IDF struck another high-rising building that was used by Hamas in Gaza City, while Hamas insisted that Khalil Kaya, their leader abroad, is still alive following last week's strike in Qatar. And meanwhile, Egypt is reducing security coordination with Israel, while 2 Iranian agents were captured in Syria and astonished their interrogators with the information that they provided. In other news, the IDF eliminated another operative trying to rebuild terror infrastructure in southern Lebanon and also intercepted another ballistic missile that was fired at Israel by the Houthis in Yemen on Saturday evening. And in diplomatic news, United States President Donald Trump and other senior administration officials met with the Qatari Prime Minister bin Abdullah Al Thani on Saturday evening against the backdrop of the Israeli strike in Qatar. He reportedly told the American president that we will take all measures to defend the security of the state. El Thani is advancing a diplomatic move with senior American officials, including discussions on a security agreement. However, on Monday, there will also be an emergency summit in Qatar to discuss last week's Israeli strike on the Hamas meeting in that city, and Iranian President Mas Pestin, as well as Turkish President Recep Erdogan, will be in attendance. This brings us to a peak of the diplomatic blitz against Israel after the strike in Qatar. At the same time, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio was scheduled to meet with senior Israeli officials in Jerusalem on Sunday. We'll bring you some more details about this visit, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, whose statement over the weekend that eliminating the Hamas leaders in Qatar will remove the obstacle to releasing the Israeli hostages. And one thing that's sure to come up in the meetings, but which is unlikely to get publicly reported on, is the concerns over another round of direct fighting between Israel and Iran. The Ayatollahs are facing all kinds of problems that they have no idea how to deal with. So they're threatening Israel to distract the attention. And speaking of distractions, the United Nations General Assembly held a vote over the weekend to approve a non-binding resolution for the establishment of a Palestinian state. Final vote was 142 in favor, 10 against, and a handful of people that abstained. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Dia Pinto, bringing you all the news from the Middle East and Israel, together with Mati Shashani. So stay tuned to the truth. In the shadow of the preparations for the conquest of Gaza City and the attempts to evacuate the population from it, the IDF continues to heat high-rise buildings and other infrastructure that is useful for Hamas. The IDF spokesperson declared over the weekend that the entire city is a dangerous combat zone from which evacuation must take place immediately. The IDF also announced that it completed 5 waves of strikes in Gaza City as part of Operation Gideon's Chariots B, in which more than 500 targets were attacked. In parallel, preparations continue for a ground incursion while attempting to evacuate civilians to the south of the Strip due to the congestion in the El Mawasi area, and meanwhile, Israel's other fronts are not taking any breaks. Over the weekend, 2 Iranian agents were captured in Syria, and what they told the IDF intelligence during their investigations astonished everyone. The Secret Operational Unit 840, operating within the Quds of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, is recruiting civilians, some of whom did not know at all who's on behalf of who they are acting for the purpose of carrying out attacks against the IDF forces in the buffer area. This is not a big surprise, but it does add one more thing that the IDF needs to be on guard against. And elsewhere, the Wall Street Journal reported over the weekend that Israel used cruise missiles that were fired from aircrafts to carry out the strike in Qatar. This is significant because only a few air forces in the entire world have this capability, and we'll tell you more about this. And TBN Israel senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will bring us a closer look at the drama of Qatar versus Israel as President Donald Trump enters the eye of the storm. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio begins an official visit to Jerusalem. Rubio has already told the reporters that the dispute over the strike in Qatar will not change relations despite the president's criticism of this move. However, there are many other issues that the American Secretary of State will need to discuss with Israel, and he will also meet with the families of hostages that are still being held in Gaza by Hamas. And meanwhile, senior Egyptian officials claim that they thwarted Israeli attempts to assassinate senior Hamas figures in Cairo and that such a move would be considered a declaration of war. Those are some strong words, obviously, but they must be understood in light of Egypt's fears of losing its status as a mediator between Israel and Hamas. And meanwhile, Qatar continues trying to harm Israel ahead of the emergency summit of Muslim countries in Dubai on Monday. While in Iran, they are preparing the ground to form an anti-Israel regional coalition, and amidst all of this, Prime Minister Netanyahu admitted the failure to eliminate Hamas leaders in Qatar, but added, if we get rid of them, the obstacle to release the hostages will be removed. And elsewhere at the United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York over this weekend, a proposal by France and Saudi Arabia for a non-binding resolution aimed at establishing a Palestinian state passed with 142 countries voting in favor, 10 voting against, and a few countries abstaining. The statement also included condemnations of Hamas together with a long list of accusations against Israel. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, commented that this measure grants backing to the terrorist organization. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani, and this is your boots on the ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 709 of the war against Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the orders of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I want to call on you to continue in showing up for the sake of the truth. The people of Israel need your help in the campaign against the agents of lies all around the world. So stand with Israel. Help us spread the truth of what's happening here in Israel. You can do that by sharing our content with as many people as possible. Leave a like and comment in the comments section, and most importantly, click that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we'll start today's report with the news from the Gaza Strip and the work against the terrorist organization Hamas. The IDF continues spreading the operational infrastructure for entry into the maneuver in Gaza City. On Friday evening, the IDF spokesperson announced that the IDF had completed 5 waves of strikes in Gaza City, hitting more than 500 targets as part of the next phase of Operation Gideon Chariots B. The IDF, led by the Southern Command, continues the broad activity against terror infrastructure and high-rise buildings that, according to the IDF, were converted into military infrastructures in the Gaza City area to be used by Hamas. And meanwhile, over the weekend, the 7th Brigade finished activity on the southern outskirts of Gaza, and in preparations for activity in Gaza City, the 162nd Division is operating in several areas adjacent to the Gaza Strip, as well as in the city of Gaza itself. In parallel, the IDF struck a series of targets in the city area yesterday, including another high-rise building which was destroyed. Such activity of striking buildings is expected to continue in the coming days also. And as part of the strikes, according to the IDF, observation and sniper positions were destroyed together with buildings that are containing operational tunnel shafts, weapons depots, and additional Hamas terror infrastructure. The IDF is also attempting to encourage the city's residents to evacuate ahead of the operation to capture the city, After another tower was destroyed at noon on Saturday, reports from Gaza said that the army shelled the west of the city. There were also reports of a series of strikes in the Rimmel neighborhood, Tel El Qamah, and in the Hadi camp. The buildings that were destroyed house Qamah's military infrastructures that are used to advance and to carry out terror schemes against the IDF forces in the area. In the Army's statement over the weekend, it was said that, amongst other things, that the IDF will continue to increase the rate of strikes in the focused manner based on precise intelligence in order to harm Hamas's terror infrastructure, disrupt its operational readiness, and reduce the threat to our forces as part of the preparations for the next phases of this operation. At the same time, the IDF is acting to encourage the departure of Gaza City residents, and according to assessments, around 200,000 residents have already left, with many more preparing to leave. The IDF spokesperson's unit in Arabic, Colonel Avehayati, addressed the residents of Gaza directly over the weekend, saying, "We urge you to use El Rashid Street and move immediately to the humanitarian area in El Mawasi, and also to the available areas in the central camps." Connolly also published a map with the evacuation instructions and emphasized that the entire city of Gaza is defined as a red zone, that is, dangerous combat zone from which you must evacuate immediately. The blue color represents areas to which you can move, and that area will be a humanitarian area, but also include open spaces that you can move to. The green color represents the humanitarian area in El Mawasi. That is where we urge residents to go, since it provides a broader and better humanitarian response. And as part of the evacuation operation, the IDF also warned the civilian population via recorded messages, text messages, leaflets, and phone calls. However, amidst the IDF preparations to send ground forces into Gaza City, Hamas is also preparing for this possibility. In the defense establishment, the assessment is that in the maneuver in Gaza, Hamas will try to increase the scope of attempts to kidnap soldiers. The threat of kidnapping soldiers is not new, and such attempts have been recorded in the recent period. However, the assessment is that the number of attempts to kidnap soldiers will increase dramatically, and this issue is being taken very seriously by the senior officials in the Israeli defensive establishment. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on all of these developments. So, keep spreading the truth, share and follow us. And most importantly, do not forget to click that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to what's happening in Israel, real-time boots on the ground style. Now, before we move on, I want to talk to you about some of the things that are going on here in Israel that are being reported on by most media outlets. Life here in Israel hasn't just been about physical recovery. It's about people trying to rebuild from the ground up. Many hardworking Israelis, especially small businesses, business owners, and craftspeople, have had their life turned upside down because of this war, which still isn't over. Many people were called to reserve duty in the IDF, while many others had to leave their homes because they were under fire. Countless people have lost months of income almost overnight. Now they're trying to start again by reopening their businesses, restocking shelves, and getting back to doing what they love, but it's not easy and they need help. That's why ARTA exists. ARTA partners directly with these small businesses, buying their handmade goods and delivering them in beautiful boxes to homes around the world. Each box helps real families get back on their feet and puts money in the hands of those working hard to recover with dignity and not with charity. So if you want to be part of this effort, go to www.alabucks.com/tbnil and use the code tbnil to get 10% off of your subscription. Again, that's www.artabox.com/tbnil. One box, one family, one step closer to rebuilding. Now, let's get back to the news, and we're shifting our focus to the northern arena. Over the weekend, there was a report about an escalation in the systematic struggle against 840, which is a secret operational Iranian unit with the Quds Force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. According to the IDF, on July 3, 2025, An Air Force aircraft struck and eliminated the Lebanese terrorist Qasem Salah el-Husseini in the Kafirul area in the southern outskirts of Beirut. Al-Husseini was previously responsible for directing attacks and several weapon smuggling operations into Judea and Samaria in various points in the northern sector of Israel, and he drove connections with Syrian and with Lebanese traders for this purpose of smuggling weapons. In parallel to his involvement in terror, Husseini also handled an officer from Assad's army, the Syrian army, the equivalent rank at the Lieutenant Colonel Hassan Mahmoud Aliaba. He was sent by him to locate, to recruit, and to train local operatives from southern Syria. Together, they sent 2 additional terrorists, Abu Hamza and Haider Ili, for dedicated training to plan and execute attacks against the IDF forces in the buffer zone between Israel and Syria. And about a week after al-Husseini's elimination in Beirut, his right-hand man and principal emissary in Lebanon, Mohammed Sahib, was thwarted in a strike in the El Nimri